Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Municipal Planning Commission for the City of Lacombe for Wednesday, March 1st. It is now 5 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. Just a reminder to everyone that we will be utilizing the microphones and whatnot this evening. We do have at least one individual joining us electronically, and I believe that will come up later on as a proponent for our one and only permit application for discussion this evening. Agenda first. Member Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor? That's unanimously approved. Thank you. And then we have before us the minutes from our February 1st meeting, primarily to do with the broom tree permit, as I recall. So we had an opportunity to go through them. It was a rather lengthy meeting, so if there's anybody that has any questions or whatnot, now would be the time to bring them forward.
I will move the minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. See no other indication of questions or concerns. So I will call the question. All those in favor? So approved unanimously. Thank you. And so for this evening, our item number 4, the development permit applications, we do have one for a freestanding sign with variance at 5001 52nd Street, item 4.1. Who will be handling this item to start with?
That would be me.
Very good.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So as Mayor Creasy indicated, the applicant is on Teams this evening. So they are available for questions if there's anything that I can't answer. And so what we're talking about today is the application for a freestanding sign, including a variance to the allowable number of signs on the parcel of land in question. The property is Zone C1 downtown commercial, which provides an attractive and vibrant area for pedestrian-oriented commercial activities and services. The erection of one freestanding sign per parcel is a permitted use in the district, and administration is not in support of the application. And so what we're looking for the commission's approval or not today would be the variance to the land use bylaw of 100%. So they have 2 freestanding signs on the site. So one would be in addition to the bylaw, so 100% variance. We did circulate the application to 16 property owners within 60 meters and received 4 responses. 2 of the responses were in support. They didn't provide any additional comments. They just checked off the support. And then there was one, neither support or opposition. They just said it doesn't affect their property. And there were no concerns now that the sign is being used. And we'll get into what that means here as part of the presentation. So in regards to the background on this sign, it is a little bit of a lengthy one dating back to December 2020 when we first received a complaint about the sign. And the complaint was about an abandoned sign. So on page 7 of the report, there are pictures of the sign with a blacked out message panel. And so an abandoned sign is a sign which no longer identifies or advertises a bona fide business, service, owner, product, or activity, and or for which no legal owner can be found. So in this case, it was abandoned because there was no advertisement on it. And so we did send a letter to the owner, just asking them what their plan was for the sign, and we did not receive a response. So that occurred in early 2021. And then throughout 2021, again, administration, so planning and development, monitored the sign for usage to see if a business would be advertised in it. We received 2 more complaints, sent a second letter to the owner, to which they responded to us on June the 9th and told us they were going to use the sign. So we further monitored, and come early 2022, another inspection was conducted confirm the sign if it was being used as the owner told us, and it was not. So through 2022, there were a number of steps taken. We sent a third letter to the owner to either remove or use the sign by August 26th. And then that inspection on August 26th still showed that there was no business signage on it. And so then we worked through the process of issuing a stop order to actually remove the abandoned sign. And so that was issued on November the 30th. And the owner was given until January the 8th, 2023 to actually take down the sign. 2 days before the date on the stop order, the owner did contact administration to have several conversations about the legality of the sign, how long it had been there, what the process would be going forward. And so this is what has brought us to you today, is we did give the owner the opportunity to make an application for an illegal sign to make it legal, resulting in a variance to the bylaw for 2 signs. And so the proposal, as noted, is to keep the sign, which is existing. So that would be the picture on the left, advertising Tiny Tracks Daycare. And then the picture on the right shows the 2 signs. So there's a sign on the south side of the parcel and a sign on the north side of the parcel. So the applicant, as noted, they can speak to their request if they wish. And if allowed by the chair, their letter of intent is contained in the agenda package, but it basically talks about the fact of how long the sign has been there, and that they weren't aware that they would lose the legal status of the sign if they didn't use it for a certain period of time, which I'll explain here when we go through the sections of the bylaw. So today, MPC, you could approve the sign if you feel it would not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of the neighboring parcels of land. And so administration, as noted, we don't support it. Our opinion is that it does negatively affect the use, enjoyment, and value of the adjacent property to the north due to its close proximity to the property line. There's also several sections in the sign section of the land use bylaw. One of them talks about a sign not conflicting with the general character of the surrounding streetscape, the architecture of nearby buildings, or be liable to create a cluttered appearance to the streetscape. And so in our opinion, based on the location of the sign, its proximity to the building, the amount of to remove it within 30 days or a reasonable time frame established by the development authority. And so we feel that it does not fulfill any further functions as it years. We know for sure it's been abandoned since December 2020, but we actually believe it's been abandoned for approximately 14 years and in the state with just the black panel on it. And that's the reason that we issued the stop order. And then in regards to the bylaw and the variance that would need to be considered today, if you choose to approve the sign, only 1 freestanding sign per parcel may be erected. And so in the bottom picture, you can see the second freestanding sign, which is on the south side of the parcel. And basically how this came to be is that this sign was approved. The sign in question, we don't have a record of a permit for it. So we actually don't know when it was initially constructed, but we know it's been there since at least 2009 when Rexall Drugs was in this location, but prior to that. And then when the second sign went in on the south side, it was under a different bylaw, which allowed a freestanding sign on each property boundary. And so it got approved because you have a sign on the north property boundary and this one is on the south property boundary. Now we have a different bylaw today, which allows only 1 freestanding sign. And so what that results in is a legal non-conforming use. So it was legal because at one point in time it was allowed, but it's non-conforming because it isn't allowed today. With a legal non-conforming use, you can't discontinue that use for 6 or more consecutive months, or you lose the legal non-conforming status. So essentially, it's no longer grandfathered because it discontinued use for 6 or more months. And so that would be the screen about the legal non-conforming use. So we know it's been discontinued since at least December 2020. Therefore, it just becomes an illegal use, which is why they're now allowed to apply for a permit, because they can apply to now make it legal again with a variance. I hope that makes sense. Legal non-conforming is a little bit tricky. So as I noted, this is the sign in question. This is kind of the zoomed in version that you can see the panel as it existed. Like I said, we believe it's been like that for at least 14 years when Rexall Drugs vacated the property and has just been covered in black paint since. The south freestanding sign, again, was erected under another bylaw because it was on the south property. You can see that it actually does advertise all of the businesses that are in the business plaza currently, with one empty panel for a potential future business. And so when it comes to the whether this sign is needed to fulfill the business requirements, there are already now 3 because the owner went ahead and put a panel in the sign in question. So Tiny Tracks has advertised on the south sign, it has a fascia sign, and now they've also put it on the north sign. So our records indicate that Tiny Tracks has been operating since 2015. And then when the owner in 2021 told us they were going to use it, they did say it was going to be for Tiny Tracks, and then never proceeded to put a panel in until 2 days prior to the date on the stop order that we issued. And so our recommendation today is that MPC would refuse the development permit for the freestanding sign for 5 reasons, and I will outline those since we do have the applicant listening in today. So lack of compelling planning rationale provided as to why a second freestanding sign is required on the parcel. The freestanding sign no longer fulfills its functions, as the south freestanding sign advertises the businesses operating from the parcel, as well as the various fascia signs located on the front of the building. The freestanding sign conflicts with the general character of the surrounding streetscape, the architecture of nearby buildings, and creates a cluttered appearance to the streetscape. The freestanding sign affects the use, enjoyment, and value of the adjacent property to the north due to its close proximity to the property line. And the freestanding sign was discontinued and abandoned for a period of greater than 6 consecutive months, and therefore is an illegal use. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Senior Development Officer McLaughlin. Appreciate that. Doesn't look like to me there's a tremendous amount of questions. Member Nowichin?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do have one question in regards to the cost of the sign that went into that pylon. Was that at Tiny Tracks' expense or the building owner's expense?
It is Tiny Tracks' expense.
Any additional questions or concerns? So the reason that Municipal Planning Commission exists is to try and make sense of some difficult situations. This is a difficult one for me. It's been problematic because of the time length that it's went on, and there certainly are problems, as many have been outlined on the reasoning or the rationale behind the direction that has been taken by administration. It is difficult with the current condition of the sign, however, for me to suggest that it would be removed now. I'm just curious down the road when the current advertiser on that sign, should that change, is the owner of the property okay to just change it to another business, or does it get removed at that point? How would that play out?
Mayor Creasy, if the commission was going to move to approve the sign, you could put a number of conditions on it in regards to maybe you're comfortable approving it for tiny tracks, but at the point where their advertisement is removed, then the sign is removed. That could be a condition. I have worded something, so if you move in that direction, then I can read that out to you as part of the recommendation for approval if you go that way.
Well, thank you for thinking that far ahead. That was something I see it as being problematic because I do not think that it does really go with that neighborhood with the building to the immediate north of it and whatnot. And I think that it would be worth consideration for future MPs here and whatnot to see that in fact was identified as an issue at this point in time, and have it brought forward in a matter there. Otherwise, we'd be looking at another period of time, this one, which was far too long from the use, because I think it probably is, in fact, a couple of decade old sign, because it was in place for the drugstore that was there many years previous. So as one of the committee, I think that would be a reasonable expectation for there to be some consideration should the use of the advertising on that sign change. Member Gullickson?
Thank you, Chair Creasy. I have a question regarding the south sign. And if there's enough room on that sign to advertise all of the potential businesses that could go in that little mall? Is there enough room on that sign for, because I understand some of that is vacant upstairs right now. Is that not correct?
Sir, that second floor is presently all vacant. So we have to renovate, and there'll be a bunch of new businesses will be required, offices, etc. We don't really have enough room. In fact, daycare sign is on it because right now we had a room on that one, but the second floor is only one tenant, which is a chiropractor. And there will be need of more signage on that one.
Okay, so potentially you would be removing tiny tracks from the south sign and putting other businesses in that location, filling up that sign. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's what the intention is.
I do have a real issue with the process here where that sign stayed vacant for so long. I do agree that that was a little bit ridiculous. But as far as the sign itself, I think that maybe it is needed for that mall, and the sign itself I have no issue with. I have a problem with it being vacant for as long as it was without responding to the city requests.
The issue was dragged along because there was one sign, and after that, when we know the seriousness of it, we did move on, but it been postponed and allowed to take time. That's okay as long as you're using it, but at the end, it was crucial to have that sign on. So we had to move in. And only another thing is that when we are entering from north side, so that street is open, so it's kind of more helpful from the people coming from north side where the daycare is. It's right at that end. So most people who are local, they're driving from the north side and coming into the property. So I know since other sign was there, we didn't realize the seriousness of leaving it empty was bad. So I kind of apologize for not taking it seriously at that time.
Member Nowichin?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Two things. One, it's just my opinion that every business does not need its opportunity to get on a pylon sign. You have plenty of shopping areas in various municipalities where you'll have 10 businesses with 4 on the pylon sign. So I don't think that really plays into this in my mind. But I actually would like to hear the amended proposal from planning on the consideration of keeping the tiny track sign and then possibly removing the pylon after that business vacates.
Through Mayor Creasy, so I did word a condition having similar concerns if the application did get approved. So the condition would read, the applicant shall ensure that the freestanding sign remains in use at all times. Discontinuance of the use for 6 or more months, example, no business advertisement on the sign, will result in the sign being deemed as an abandoned sign and will result in the sign having to be removed. No further approvals for a second freestanding on the site will be considered. So that left it open so that if they changed it out from Tiny Tracks to a different business, that the sign could remain, but specifies that it can't be discontinued for 6 or more months. So within 6 months, if Tiny Tracks didn't advertise, but a new business was advertised on the sign, then it would be fine. If MPC had the mind to limit it to the use of Tiny Tracks, that would be very difficult because we're talking about the use of a freestanding sign, and what that use is shouldn't really matter what business is potentially advertised on it, because the business isn't the use that you're considering. The use is the freestanding sign, which advertises businesses.
So is that type of motion something that anyone would like to see considered in this case? Member Nowichan?
I'm torn in this one, to be frank. I'm not feeling good about the sign staying. The main concern I have is the fact that it was left a little irresponsibly so long without communication, and that now it's become Tiny Tracks' problem that they had the expense of this sign. So I understand the usage is the concern here. I would be for this motion if it was tailored to Tiny Tracks being the tenant, and after they were gone, the sign had to be removed. But otherwise, I'm not feeling too good about the sign.
So I just think we need to be clear as the cost of the sign, in my opinion, is somewhat irrelevant. I'm just curious if the owner of the business and the building owner in this particular case are in fact different entities or not. I'm not 100% sure whether or not they are, but that has not been determined at this point in time anyway. Go ahead, Senior Officer McLaughlin. Thank
Mayor
you.
Creasy. So potentially what MPC could do as a condition is you can say that upon the use of the daycare facility ceasing, the applicant shall remove the freestanding sign. You can't tie it to Tiny Tracks because we didn't approve Tiny Tracks, we approved a daycare facility. So when we're looking at uses, we can't make decisions based on people. So we can't base it on Tiny Tracks, but we can base it on the use, which is the daycare facility. So if the daycare facility changed names, then potentially the sign would change to that new name as well. But we can certainly tie it to a use of a daycare facility so that it couldn't be used by another tenant or a new business that comes in. But the daycare specifically would be the way that you would have to word it if that's what you wanted, Member Nowichan. to tie it specifically to that, but we can't tie it to tiny tracks. But daycare facility is a use.
I'll let you digest that one for a second. I just want to know that if at some point in the future that did occur and the owner is still has the option of reapplying for a non-conforming sign at that point. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor Creasy, we can't stop someone from making an application for something that is either permitted or discretionary in the district. So they can reapply if they wish and would go through the same process.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Member Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. I have a bit of an issue with that, I guess. I like your original one as far as the, if it was vacant for 6 months, the sign wasn't being used, that it would automatically be, have to be removed. I don't mind that one. I find it hard to say that the sign can't be used for any other business. So I have a bit of a problem with that, and I'm not sure we can't really even do that. I don't think, right? I guess we can say only thing that can use it is a daycare, that's correct, right? But if that becomes a clothing store, they wouldn't be able to use the sign.
Not if MPC specifically puts the condition on that ties it to a daycare facility.
Okay. I have a bit of a problem with that because I hate to see any businesses being restricted that way, but I mean, the sign is probably not that important to it, but there is some importance to the sign or they wouldn't spend the money on it. So I would rather have the resolution that you had, the condition of if it goes vacant for 6 months, that it has to be removed. But I'm not sure of our enforcement on that. How strong can we be? Or do we have any teeth to do that?
So before you answer that one, I was just curious, what is the current policy or bylaw for all freestanding stands in that regard for so-called abandonment timeframe and whatnot?
There isn't a timeline specifically in the bylaw,
Okay.
but as a planning authority, we can implement sunset clauses. So you could even say that you are approving this sign for 2 years, and then it has to be removed. So we do have that authority to implement timelines on development permits if we want to see something not happen, if we want to see how things will go. If we want to assess, the approval of something, then you can put a timeline. So in this case, we would be tying it to, so the way that it was worded initially, we're tying it to discontinuing for 6 or more months. And so that's trying to prevent a 14-year lapse where there's nothing advertised on the sign, and then it would be removed. Once removed, they can't reapply. We can say that in the development permit condition. So they can't, after 6 months, discontinue it. And
Been in place for far too long and the records do not indicate any process of permitting that it went through. If someone were to apply for one today, go through the proper process, how does the bylaw read if in fact they came into a situation where it was not in use for a period of time? Or is there any outline for them? Not on this specific site, on a new one now, if it was permitted properly and whatnot, what would be the time frame, if any, when it would become an issue when there was not advertisement on the sign for any other business?
thank you. I understand your question. So right now, in the bylaw, there is nothing under abandoned sign to say what the timeline is for it to be considered abandoned. So that is something as an amendment that we're looking at cleaning up, where we would associate a timeline to it. within reason. We do know in economic climates, it does take time to lease business spaces. And so we don't want to prohibit an owner from having to remove it because of the economic climate that we're in. So that is something that we're looking at changing. But right now, there's nothing to a timeline to attribute what means abandoned. So it's at our discretion at this point.
Okay, so until such time as there was a complaint made by a citizen, presumably an adjoining business, most commonly, or notified by administration, theoretically it could go on. That the reason I'm asking was I actually would have assumed, not knowing, that's why I asked the question, because I did not know. I would have assumed there was some sort of a time frame now, and by us adding in a time frame in this one, if it was going to be any different or correspond with that. So thank you for answering that question. I think that some sort of a time frame does make sense in this case, given the past occurrences. So if anyone is interested in making a motion in that regard, or if we're sufficiently confused, what's your pleasure?
I'll try.
Member Gullikson, go ahead.
I'll try, Mayor Creasy. Okay, I would move that the Municipal Planning Commission approve the development permit for the freestanding sign with a variance to the amount of freestanding signs permitted on a parcel on a land zone C1 downtown commercial located at 5001 52 Street, lots 1 through 7, block 1, plan R1 with the following conditions. Now, how many conditions would be on here? So in this case, now that some of these conditions would not apply, right?
Councillor Gullikson, I do have the approval resolution, so we can put it on the screen so you can see what the conditions would be. So you read it very well. Thank you for that.
Okay.
I had it ready for you, but you did a great job. So basically conditions, there's 3 conditions. Conditions number 1 and 2 are standard on all development permits, so they're not specific. And condition number 3 is the new condition, which I read out to you, which talks about the sign having to be used so that if it is a new business, they remove tiny tracks and we end up 6 months later, a year later, that we can deem it abandoned and have it removed. So basically the 3rd condition is saying that if it's abandoned for 6 months, then it has to be removed. That's what this condition is saying.
And that's the one I want in there for sure. And so if that sign is not in use for whatever reason, then for that length of time, it would have to be removed.
Yes.
And there would be no follow-up, no way of getting that approved at that time, correct?
Right. So the last statement in condition number 3, no further approvals for a second freestanding sign on the site will be considered.
Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Appreciate that.
So given that the first 2 are in fact more generic, I don't think we need to read those in the record, but given that number 3 is, I think that if you're able to see that one, I would like for it to be read into the record, please. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I will read the 3rd condition here so the applicant can hear this. The applicant shall ensure that the freestanding sign remains in use at all times. Discontinuance of the use for 6 or more months, no business advertisement on the sign, will result in the sign being deemed as an abandoned sign, and will result in the sign having to be removed. No further approvals for a second freestanding sign on the site will be considered. So this is the final. So just as you understand that this is the last chance for that sign, if it's abandoned again, it will no longer be deemed or being considered to be an active sign or freestanding sign.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll live with it.
So, Mr. Sahota, is that the proper pronunciation of your name?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Very good. So, as was outlined, there is the three conditions, the first two of which I expect you have went over prior with the building, or no?
Mayor Creasy, because administration recommended refusal, that's the only thing that the applicant has seen. He has not seen the approval recommendation because it was just drafted in case MPC chose to go that way. So the first two conditions are just standard, apply to everything, but he would not have seen them.
Fair enough. Given that we do have the proponent with us, not in person, but electronically, I think that as a normal course of events, I do ask the proponents if they are familiar with the conditions. Obviously, the third one has been went over at great length. So I'm going to read the first one. This permit indicates that only the development to which it relates is authorized with the provisions of the land use bylaw and in no way relieves or excuses compliance with the land use bylaw or any other bylaws, orders, and regulations, including but not limited to the Safety Codes Act, building permit bylaw, and business license bylaw affecting such development. Very lengthy way of suggesting that there may be other regulations that apply to this particular permit as well. And the second one, all development must conform to the conditions of this development permit and the approved plans and any revisions thereto as required pursuant to the approval. Any revisions to the approved plans must be approved by a development authority. I don't think there's any plans that exist on this one, so that one is a little more difficult. Perhaps I'll have you speak on that, Senior Manager McLaughlin.
Mayor Creasy, that condition just speaks to the fact that he can't change the sign. So what you see in the agenda package in the photos is what is approved. He cannot add to it. He cannot change the height. He can't do anything to it because what we've approved is what's in the agenda package and what you see today. So if he wanted to put up a different sign, just replace it, he'd have to apply for approval for that. If he wanted to add any additional panels, he'd have to apply for approval for that because we're approving what you see today.
Very good. So, Mr. Sahota, given that those are the three conditions that I want to ask you at this time if there's any questions that you have in those regards now that you're made fully aware that those are conditions of this permit.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I understand. I respect all those things which should take in place, and I approve the planning department and council for giving consideration. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Do you have any questions with respect to the three conditions, though?
No, I think it's quite fair. Like if it's not used for 6 months, it should not be. But sometime, like there are some issues, for example, upstairs, some accounting firm used to be another thing. So there was a sign issue, but now we understand after the 6-month condition, it's not impossible to live with. Thank you.
Okay. So we do have a motion before us. I see no additional indication that there's more questions or concerns. So I will call for the vote. Those in favor? Those opposed? The record will reflect that the vote of current members is 3 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Item number 5 for the summary of permits issued by the Development Authority. Senior Officer McLaughlin, looks like you did have at least one here since our last meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. We did just have one. So the development officer approved the discretionary use of a commercial recreation establishment. And it was actually a virtual golf facility at 4714 Highway 2A. And so the use was a discretionary use. We circulated to landowners within 60 meters and received no opposition to the application. So we therefore approved the development permit and it was issued on February the 3rd. So just the one permit, discretionary. We've been issuing other permits.
A good ad.
Thank you. And as you can all see, the next proposed MPC meeting will be next month, April the 5th. And we've got a few more days when permits could be applied for. Are we approaching that end date?
We are done with that. So March 15th is officially canceled. So we have no applications to present to you on March the 15th. So that meeting will be canceled with the tentative April 5th. I don't know if we'll have anything. We'll see what comes.
Very good. I think that that was all that we had for the record. But I'll ask that members stay back for one moment after adjournment. If anybody would care to move so. Member Nauchin.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.